My name is Alina, and until last year, I would have told you, without hesitation, that I had never once let my guard down for anyone. I grew up believing that feelings like that, the kind people write songs about, were something other people got to have, not me. I was the responsible one, the careful one, the daughter who came home before dark and never gave my parents a single reason to worry. So, when everything happened with Adam, it surprised nearly everyone who knew me. It still surprises me, if I'm honest. Let me start from the beginning. I grew up in a quiet household outside Chicago, the oldest of 3 daughters. My parents were strict in the way many immigrant parents are. Not unkind, but careful, always aware of how their choices, and mine, would be seen by the wider community. I learned early on to value discretion, to think twice before speaking, and to keep my personal life exactly that, personal. My younger sisters used to tease me for being too serious, but I never minded the label. Being serious had kept me out of trouble my entire life, and I never saw a reason to change that. I graduated last spring with a degree in elementary education from a university just outside Chicago. Finding a full-time teaching position turned out to be harder than I expected, so in the meantime, I started working as a private tutor through a small tutoring company based in Skokie, a suburb just north of the city with a large, close-knit community. Twice a week, I would go to a local elementary school after regular classes ended and tutor a handful of students in reading and math in one of the empty classrooms. One of my students was a bright, chatty 8-year-old named Zoe, who struggled with reading comprehension but never stopped talking about her older brother, who she clearly adored. "My brother says I'm smarter than him," she told me once, grinning proudly. "He just doesn't want to admit it." That brother, it turned out, was the one who picked Zoe up most afternoons, since their parents worked late. His name was Adam. He was 26, tall, quiet in a way that felt calm rather than distant, and unfailingly polite whenever he came to collect his sister. At first, our interactions were nothing more than brief, friendly updates. "How did she do today?" he would ask, waiting by the classroom door. "Really well, actually. She read almost a whole page without any help." "That's because of you," he'd say. "She talks about your sessions all week." Sometimes he would arrive a few minutes early and wait quietly in the back of the classroom, watching Zoe sound out difficult words with more patience than I had expected from someone his age. Once, when Zoe finally finished an entire chapter book on her own for the first time, Adam clapped so enthusiastically that she turned bright red with embarrassment, laughing the whole way out to the car. Little moments like that made the afternoons feel warmer than a typical tutoring job usually would have. For months, that was the entire extent of our relationship. Polite conversation about a 3rd grader's reading progress. I never thought twice about it. I had never been in a relationship, had never wanted one badly enough to risk the closeness I had with my family, the trust they placed in me, or the reputation I had carefully built for myself within our community. Dating, in the way most of my American classmates talked about it, simply wasn't part of my life, and I had never felt like I was missing anything because of it. Then, one afternoon near the end of the school year, Adam lingered a little longer than usual after picking up Zoe. "Can I ask you something?" he said, shifting his weight from one foot to the other, clearly nervous. "Sure," I said, gathering my folders. "I know this might sound sudden, but I like you. I've liked you for a while now, actually. I think you're one of the most genuine people I've met, and I'd really like the chance to get to know you properly. I know that might mean marriage eventually, and I want to be upfront about that from the beginning. I remember standing there, completely still, unsure of what to say. Nobody had ever spoken to me that directly before. I appreciate you telling me, I finally said, choosing my words carefully. But I don't think that's something I'm looking for right now. He nodded, not pushing further, and left with Zoe a few minutes later. I told myself that would be the end of it. Driving home that evening, I replayed the conversation over and over, trying to understand why my hands were still slightly unsteady on the steering wheel. Nobody had ever looked at me the way Adam had looked at me in that classroom doorway, like he had thought carefully about every word before saying it. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself I had made the right choice, the only choice that made sense for someone like me. It wasn't. Over the following weeks, Adam would occasionally mention, briefly and respectfully, that his feelings hadn't changed. He never pressured me, never made me uncomfortable, never said anything inappropriate. If anything, his patience was almost unsettling. I continued to gently redirect the conversation every time, and eventually, when the school year ended and Zoe no longer needed tutoring, I assumed I would simply stop seeing him altogether. For nearly 4 months, I didn't hear from him at all. Then, one evening in late September, a message appeared on my phone from a number I recognized instantly. "Hi, Alina. I know it's been a while. I hope you don't mind me reaching out. I just wanted to check in and see how you've been. If you are enjoying this story so far, please like this video and subscribe for more emotional English stories. Now, let's continue." I stared at the message for a long time before responding. Something about the timing, the sincerity, the fact that he had waited so long instead of pushing, made me pause in a way I hadn't expected. I told my closest friend Bella about it that same night, sitting cross-legged on my bed with my phone between us. Bella and I had been roommates during our last 2 years of college, and she was the only person outside my family who really knew me, the version of me that existed underneath all the carefulness. "So, what are you going to do?" Bella asked, raising an eyebrow. "I don't know," I admitted. Part of me wants to just ignore it, like I always do, but another part of me feels like maybe I should at least talk to him. He seems like a genuinely good person, Bella, and I've never actually let myself find out. "There's nothing wrong with talking," Bella said carefully. "Just make sure you keep your boundaries. You know yourself better than that." "What if I don't, though?" I asked, surprising myself with the honesty of the question. What if I've spent so long protecting myself that I don't actually know how to do this at all? Bella smiled, the kind of smile that meant she wasn't going to give me an easy answer. "Then maybe it's time to find out, slowly, carefully. But you don't have to know everything before you start, Alina. Nobody does." I decided to reply. What followed were a few months of careful, limited conversation. We texted occasionally, never anything inappropriate, never late at night, never anything my parents would have disapproved of if they had read every message themselves. We talked about our families, our goals, small things about our days. Adam never once crossed a line, and I found myself, cautiously, looking forward to his messages in a way I had never allowed myself to look forward to anyone's before. He told me about his job at an accounting firm downtown, the long hours he worked during tax season, and his dream of eventually opening his own small practice. I told him about my job search, about how discouraging it felt to send out application after application with barely any response. about how tutoring Zoe and a handful of other kids had become the one part of my week I genuinely looked forward to. "You're good at this," he told me once, when I mentioned feeling discouraged about not finding a full-time teaching job yet. "I mean it. Zoe used to hate reading before you started working with her. Now she asks our mom to buy her new books." "That means a lot, actually," I said. "Some days it feels like I'm not doing anything meaningful." "You are," he said simply. "You just can't always see it from the inside." Conversations like that one made it easy to trust him, slowly, in small pieces. "I know I said this before," he told me one evening on a phone call, "but I meant it. I'd like this to lead somewhere real. I just want to do it the right way, with both our families involved, when the time is right." "I appreciate that," I told him. "I've never done this before, Adam. I want you to know that this is all new territory for me." "I know," he said gently. "I'm not going anywhere." For a while, those words felt true. I remember telling my mother, carefully, in vague terms, that I had been talking to someone, without giving her his name. She studied my face for a long moment before responding. "Are you happy?" she asked, which surprised me. I had expected questions about who he was, what his family did, whether it was appropriate. "I think so," I admitted. "It's strange. I've never let myself think about this kind of thing before." "Then be careful," she said. "But don't be so careful that you forget to actually live your life, Alina. There's a difference." I held on to that conversation more than I probably should have, especially considering everything that came afterward. Then, slowly, without warning, everything shifted. His replies became shorter, then less frequent, then almost non-existent. Days would pass without a single message. When he did respond, his texts felt distant, almost obligatory, nothing like the warmth I had grown used to. "Hey, is everything okay?" I texted one evening in December, after nearly a week of silence. "Yeah, just busy," he replied, hours later. I told myself it was nothing. People get busy. Work gets overwhelming. I tried not to read too much into it, the same way I had once told myself not to read into his persistence in the first place. My birthday fell in the middle of that stretch of silence. Adam had mentioned weeks earlier that he wanted to do something small to celebrate, nothing extravagant, maybe just a phone call at midnight. The day came and went without a single message from him. I sat on my bed that night, staring at my phone, refreshing an app that had nothing new to show me, feeling foolish for how much it hurt. The next morning, a short text finally arrived. "Happy belated birthday. Sorry. Yesterday got crazy busy. No explanation, no apology that felt like it meant anything, just 5 words and a period, as if that could undo the hours I had spent waiting. But the distance continued, week after week, and eventually I couldn't ignore how it made me feel. I had let myself trust someone for the first time in my life, and now I felt like I was watching that trust quietly slip away, without any clear explanation. Finally, in January, I asked him directly, during one of our rare phone calls, "Adam, I need you to be honest with me. Did something change? Because it feels like you're pulling away, and I don't understand why." There was a long pause before he answered. "My parents found out," he said quietly. "They saw some of our messages on my phone by accident. They're really against this, Alina. They have other expectations for who I'm supposed to marry, and this wasn't part of their plan." My chest tightened. "And what did you tell them?" "I told them I wanted to think about it. I told them I'd try to convince them, given some time. I just need to figure out how to approach it the right way. Okay, I said slowly. But Adam, that doesn't explain why you've been treating me like this for weeks. If something's wrong, you tell me, you don't just disappear. I'm sorry, he said. I've had a lot on my mind. I promise it's not about you. I wanted to believe him. For a while, I did. I told myself that families needed time, that big decisions couldn't be rushed, that his hesitation wasn't the same as rejection. I made excuses for him the way people often do when they're not ready to accept what's actually happening in front of them. But the pattern continued for another 3 or 4 months. Messages that took days to receive a reply. Phone calls that used to last an hour, now lasting 5 minutes before he made an excuse to go. Plans to talk to his parents that never seemed to move forward. Every time I asked him directly what was happening, I received the same vague reassurances, that he was working on it, that I shouldn't worry, that everything would be fine eventually. I started to feel like something I had never wanted to feel toward anyone, like a burden, like someone he was managing rather than someone he was choosing. You deserve someone who doesn't make you feel like this, Bella told me one night, after I had spent nearly an hour explaining the situation to her for what felt like the 100th time. I know you care about him, Alina, but caring about someone shouldn't feel this exhausting. I knew she was right, even if I didn't want to admit it. In March, I finally sent him a message I had rewritten a dozen times before finally pressing send. I don't think we should keep talking, Adam. I've asked you so many times to just be honest with me, and instead, you keep disappearing. I don't want to be something you have to manage or apologize for. I think it's better if we just end this here. My hand was shaking slightly as I pressed send. Part of me expected him to call immediately, to explain everything, to finally say whatever it was he had been avoiding for months. I sat there afterward, phone in hand, staring at the screen the way I had done so many times before, half hoping, half dreading a reply. He didn't respond that night, or the next day, or the day after that. Whatever explanation I had hoped for, whatever closure I had quietly wished for even while ending things myself, never came. Silence, it turned out, was the only answer he was ever going to give me. I told myself I had made the right decision. Objectively, I knew I had. I deserved honesty, consistency, someone who chose me clearly instead of hiding me from difficult conversations with his own family. Bella agreed. My own instincts agreed. And yet, in the weeks that followed, I found myself missing him in ways I couldn't fully explain, even to myself. I would reach for my phone out of habit, half expecting a message that never came. I would think of small things, the way he used to ask about my day before I even had the chance to ask about his, the patience he'd shown for over a year before I ever gave him a real chance, and feel a strange ache that made no logical sense, given that I was the one who had ended things. I kept catching myself in small, embarrassing moments, reaching for my phone during a quiet afternoon at work, wanting to tell him about something funny one of my students had said, before remembering there was no one to tell anymore. Passing the accounting firm downtown on the train and wondering, briefly, if he was inside, whether he still worked the same long hours, whether he ever thought of me during them. I hated how much space he still occupied in my daily thoughts, especially considering how little space I had occupied, apparently, in his final decisions. I don't understand myself, I admitted to Bella one evening, sitting on the floor of my bedroom with my back against my bed. I ended it. I know I made the right choice. So why do I still want him back? Bella thought about it for a moment before answering. Maybe it's not really about him, she said gently. Maybe it's about the fact that he was the first person you ever let yourself feel something for. You spent your whole life not letting anyone in, and then you finally did, and it didn't go the way you hoped. That kind of thing leaves a mark, even when the ending was the right one. So what do I do with that? I asked. Just wait for it to stop hurting? Sort of, Bella said, with a small, sympathetic shrug. You let it hurt for a while, honestly, instead of pretending it doesn't. And you remind yourself, on the days it feels unbearable, that wanting someone back doesn't always mean they were good for you. Sometimes it just means you're human. I sat with her words for a long time after she left that night. I think, in some way, Bella was right. It was never really just about Adam. Not entirely. It was about the version of myself I had allowed to exist for those few months. A version who let herself hope, who let herself imagine a future with someone, who let herself be vulnerable for the first time in 24 years. Losing him also meant losing that version of myself, the one who had finally opened a door she had kept closed her entire life. I don't know if Adam ever convinced his parents. I don't know if he thinks about those months the way I do, or if he has already moved on completely. We haven't spoken since that final message in March, and I don't expect that to change. In June, at a community fundraiser I attended with my mother, I saw him from across the room, standing near the entrance with a group of people I didn't recognize. Our eyes met for a brief second before he looked away, and neither of us walked toward the other. My mother, standing beside me, didn't notice anything, still talking about the raffle prizes on the table nearby. I stood there for a moment, feeling the strange weight of an entire chapter of my life passing quietly by, unspoken, in a crowded room full of people who had no idea any of it had happened. I left that evening without ever saying a word to him. It felt, in its own quiet way, like the real ending, quieter than the message I had sent in March, but somehow more final. On the drive home, my mother chatted about the fundraiser, about people she'd run into, about how nice the food had been, completely unaware of the small, silent moment her daughter had just lived through in a crowded room. I nodded along, giving short answers, grateful that some things could still be kept entirely to myself. What I do know is that despite everything, despite the hurt and the confusion and the questions that still don't have clear answers, I don't regret letting myself feel something real, even once. I used to think that never opening that door at all was the safest way to live. Now I understand that the ache of having opened it, even briefly, even painfully, taught me something that staying closed forever never could have. Maybe someday I'll open that door again, for someone who chooses me as clearly and consistently as I would choose them. Until then, I'm learning to be gentle with the parts of myself that still, quietly, wish things had ended differently, even while knowing, without a doubt, that ending them was the right thing to do. If you liked this story, please like, comment, and share. More simple and emotional stories are coming soon.